Welcome to Bean to Barstool Bite-Sized, where we spend about 5 minutes with some of our favorite people from craft beer and craft chocolate. Today we hear from Annabelle Popa, an artist and graphic designer who has created many of the eye-catching labels for Rabid Brewing in the south suburbs of Chicago. When you enter Rabid's tap room, you're greeted by an enormous 9-foot by 16-foot mural hanging over the bar that depicts a fanciful scene telling a mythological version of beer's origin story. Annabelle painted that mural, and here she talks about the creation process for that and the creative give and take of designing beer labels.
When we were first talking about designs, characters, vision, like the general vibe of the mural, I think they had their main character, Kaz, who is the satyr. They had him kind of solidified, but there's this other secondary character named Promethea who is in the mural, but that was kind of, I think, right before we had finalized her design.
Mm-hmm.
And so we knew that we had these two characters that we wanted to kind of build the narrative around. And Tobias was mentioning how he may eventually want to create like comics or different kind of narratives and stories around each beer name, but that the mural was more like, I guess, the basis for the world. So the mural, there's a lot of like little hidden things in it. They had, I don't know exactly how many specific brews at that point, but there was maybe like Dwarves of Doom. And so somewhere in the mural, there's like these little dwarves with the dwarf logo. I think it was maybe in the cliffs somewhere. And so I tried to incorporate a little bit of everything just to kind of create this world building of all these different brews that they would continue on. My favorite part, just because I love animals, was like this weird moose god that they were like harvesting the hops from, and that like you have these constellations in between the horns, and even there was another character with these big horns. So that was kind of like my little bit that I added to it, kind of creating these like ultimate celestials that then these two characters would harvest, whether it was like, I think the other horned god had like the initial beer and kind of like this juice and kind of weird liquid from another world. So that was kind of them as, I guess, Kaz and Promethea, kind of Tobias and Ray, taking from these larger characters that are like symbols of the universe or something bigger. And so that was just trying to create like a really larger narrative mythology that maybe eventually we can continue to pull from if we need to with other beers, but central to like the two main characters. Normally I don't really have a studio, but I had been able to find like a really big wall in one of the bedrooms that I was living in at the time. And so I had to kind of like move the bed, move everything around, put paper down, and then I had to like nail or staple up the mural to the wall. And the edges were kind of like curving. It was very like classic sketchy artist kind of thing. And then at that point, I obviously had already sketched it and planned it out. And so at that point, it's just painting it much larger on the canvas. So like personally, I am originally a painter, illustrator, but digital art has always been something that I've, taught myself throughout the years. And then I even did many years of graphic design. And so the labels weren't extremely out of my comfort zone. Those might have been even more in my comfort zone just because you can kind of mess with them a little bit more digitally, while painting, once you paint something, it's hard to change it and adjust it. Personally, in terms of working with Rabid, the labels have been much more fun just because they're more flexible and I can kind of add a little bit more detail, add a little bit more style, especially with like the Manticore and Horus. Those were kind of like my own character designs. And the dwarves as well, but I'm like, I'll draw humans, but it's not as fun for me. So the other two having these like monsters that like Ray and Tobias don't really have maybe a strong connection to them. So it's like they give the artist a little bit more freedom. While when you have your two main characters, it's like you have the design that you have to stick to. Ultimately, I was still able to design them, but it's like a little bit more closed parameters. Dwarves of Doom, I know Tobias was a little bit more, I guess, excited for it. So I kind of did like a very basic dwarf kind of thing. And then he was like, oh, add some glowing, or let's try this color. So he was a little bit more in tune with the designing of that, which is, I find really fun because also as an illustrator, you're really trying to get their kind of view and what they want. And so sometimes it's really helpful to have that feedback. But with Manticore, I just kind of like drew a really cool Manticore, added some little fun things on the side, and they were like, oh, that looks great. Maybe change the snarl.
You can learn more about Annabelle at annabellepopa.com and about Rabid at rabidbrewing.com. I'll link to both in the show notes. The music today was by my dear friend Anna P.S. My name is David Nilsson. Thanks for listening to Bean to Barstool Bite Sized.